All right, yeah.
Hey, Breaking Brown family, it's Yvette Carnell once again talking to you today. I'm going to give you a chance, like I always do, for you to get settled. Give you a chance to go and get yourself a glass of whatever you decide to drink on the night. Give yourself a chance to go get popcorn. Give yourself a chance to put the kids away, or child or children, or walk out of the room that may be loud or whatever the case may be. I just want to give it a second for you all to kind of get to where you need to kind of get situated. It is a little dark. It looks a little dark. It looks a little dark on my page too. Okay. Give you all a chance. So take the moment. Take the moment that I'm giving you to, we have something that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about wealth, but we're going to talk about it in a different context. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about wealth insofar as wealth transfers. And we're going to kind of break down. Someone told me a while ago, I spoke to someone and they said, Yvette, the problem, or part of the problem is that you say stuff sometimes and you kind of speed through it. So you make some kind of pronouncement and then you kind of speed through it and you don't give enough detail as in terms of why this is the case. Like, you'll talk about it, but you won't say, hey, this is the case because of this. You'll say that there's a wealth gap, and you'll say that the wealth gap is slavery, but you won't get any more specific about it. So what I want to do today is get specific about wealth, and get specific about wealth and wealth transfers in Black life. That's what I want to do. So one of the things that we've talked about is in terms of wealth transfers. One of the things that we've talked about is the 228 years that it takes, a Black family to reach the wealth of a white family. And when we talk about that, and when we hear people say, well, you know what, we can catch them or we can pass them. The problem is that we think of these people as standing still, as if they got a lot of wealth and they're there, and we just don't have that wealth. But we're going to catch up to them where they are, as if they're in a static position. Okay? That's one of the problems with how we talk about wealth. So I want to talk about wealth transfers, because what I want to do is get you in the mindset of understanding how wealth works. I want to get you in the mindset of understanding that wealth is about something much more than what you earn. Wealth is something a lot more than what you earn and who you are who you are in this one lifetime. Because once you understand wealth, you understand that one lifetime is not enough to do what you need to do in terms of accumulating wealth. So let's imagine it this way before I get started. Let's imagine that there are two lines. There's a very high line for white people, and there's a line down here for the African American community. These lines are going like parallel to each other. One is up here, one is down here. Now something has to happen to the line down here to make the trajectory go in this direction, to make it start going up. There's something that has to happen. There's something that has to change, because this line up here is not going down, and it's not going down because of wealth transfers. Now, what do you mean, Yvette, in terms of wealth transfers, and we can't catch up? Like, what does that mean? Well, one way to think about that, and one way we can think about that, is is about Jeff Bezos, right? He's the head of Amazon, and we talk about him, and we talked about him all the time. But when you look at the people on the Forbes list, he and the others in the top 5, top 10, all the people who are the richest in the world, because if you're the richest in America, you're among the richest in the world. All of these people, what you see with the Jeff Bezos and all of these people, what you see is that they are accumulating wealth faster. There was a great article about how Bezos actually, made a bunch of money because Amazon had a good quarter and he became $2 billion richer. When you talk about income inequality, what you're saying is that wealth accumulation is speeding up among the people who have the most. And what has sort of kept us for such a long time, and what has sort of maintained us for such a long time as African Americans, is that we were never rich. We were never even mostly solidly middle class. We were working class people, working class poor, for the most part. But what that means in terms of where we are today is that Bezos and the people like him are hoarding all of it, and they're taking more. So now, if all of your people are at the bottom and the people at the bottom have less, You have to think about what that means for your life in terms of what Bezos, and not even just Bezos, like you think about you think about it in terms of wealth. The wealth class among rich people starts at like white rich people starts at like 1 million. But that's like where we are in terms of the top 1% of black people is at 1.4 million. So what I want to discuss today in terms of that context is how do you raise a highly functional child, right? So we always talk about, well, you don't have wealth, but we don't talk about what wealth means in the context of raising a highly functional adult. Like, what does it mean when you say you're going to raise a kid and he's going to be able to compete? When you tell yourself that, I'm going to be able to raise a kid and that kid is going to be able to compete and he's going to be able to go to Harvard. He's going to be able to go to Stanford. He's going to have a shot. When you tell yourself that, you are competing. Whether you know it or not, you are competing with people like Bezos and everybody below him, because you have a whole stable structure. You don't have to be a billionaire to be in that stable structure. And you're saying that you want to be like these people, but you don't have the tools to create a highly functional child to compete with these people. And you can't tell me, well, I don't have to compete with these people because listen, Yvette, I don't have to compete with these people because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to have a good education and have a good life. I'm not trying to compete with these people. Well, the problem with that is you are competing with those people. This is America. There is no black America and white America where like kids apply to the white Stanford. You know, his kids apply to the white Stanford and your kids get to apply to the black Stanford. That's not how it works. When you compete in the job force, when you compete everywhere, you compete with these people. So what I'm telling you is that, you know, we have to find, we need to discuss how do you rate, what does it require to actually fix the wealth gap? If you were talking about fixing, what does that require of you, of me, and everyone else? Well, the thing that we find and the thing that we kind of get is that there have to be, and you're going to hear this phrase a lot, so just listen to it. There have to be a lot of life events that create the situation in which your child can compete. These are life events that means that your child can come out here and be a highly functional adult, which is what you have to be. Because in America, where wealth has calcified like that, if you're not that person, then what that means in terms of your life is that you fail. I mean, it would be easy to make it. It would be easier to make it, you know, better than that. But that's what it is. You fail. If you're not able to raise a highly functional adult, you fail. So what does that mean? You know, you hear a lot of black people get involved in pyramid schemes and all sorts of things because they missed opportunities to be highly functional adults. So what does it mean if you say I want to be a highly functional adult? What does it mean to actually be that? And the one thing we can start with in terms of life events is that in order to understand wealth, you have to understand that wealth is not a cash flow. It's not a cash flow. Like your job and your income is a cash flow. Wealth is not a cash flow. It's a reservoir of money or homes or something that assets, whatever, that creates opportunities for you. That's what it is. So if we're talking about it in that frame, and if we're using that framing, what that really means is that there are no things to create opportunities for your kids. Okay? So one of the things that we need to, you know, if we could pull up that Bezos, that was a great article. There was a great article on it. Which really talked about how much money he made in like a day. He made that in a day. Okay? These are the kind, with any kind of wealth, these are the kind of life events that you can talk about when you ask, what are these life events? Okay? You can send your child to boarding school, and that's a life event because it puts you in a certain net. It puts you in a netting of wealth. That's what it does for you. You can do that if that's who that is one life event that begins to set you up for a certain life. You know, a while back, I talked to Antonio Moore, and I'll bring him in at some point in the conversation. I talked to him about these balls. And there were these balls that the kids were using these exclusive schools to learn how to program. And they were learning how to program in like elementary. That is a life event that puts you in a certain space to do a certain thing. That's a life event. It puts you in a space to be successful. If you go if you go to a private school, that's also a life event that puts you in a space to be successful. Now I want to just take one break right here, friend. If you're watching this video, I want you to like it, share it, because it seems like I don't have as many people in here as normal. Just like it, share it on YouTube, share it on Facebook. But if you like it, then a lot of people start coming in, because Facebook, that's Facebook's cue. If there's a problem, if you can't see it, let me know, of course. But share it, subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. But let me get back to these life events. Private school is a life event. Now, if we can go to it's very interesting when we talk about private school, because it also puts you in that net. It puts you in that web of wealth. Most of us are not in that web of wealth. We're not in that web of wealth. But if you go to, one of the things we normally think about Barack Obama is that he's black like you, he's black like me, he's African American. That's how our mindset works in terms of who he was. Well, this is what he came from. What we don't know is that he had certain life events that put him into a space where he could be in the running to be president, which most African Americans don't have. See, the problem is we normally think of Barack, of everything through the lens of blackness, right? So you're brown, you're just like me. We don't think that he got set up that way, and we don't think of life in terms of what many of us don't have that Obama did have. So let's look at that first. This is Punahou School. This is where Obama went to school. This is where Obama went to school. Now he's telling you and me, I'm just like you, man. I'm down. I'm a brother. Now you think about this. This man went to this school. Play that next clip. We got another one. This is like the Punahou Castle. Now this is a private school. I want to tell you how much this school costs. This school costs $22,000 a year. This is a $22,000 a year private school that Barack Obama went to, that his grandparents sent him to. The same grandmother who gave him almost $500,000 in inheritance. Now that's another life event. Inheritance is a life event. So ask yourself, can you send your kid to these schools? Ask yourself, can you give your child inheritance in the amount of $500,000 or anything? Can you leave them $100,000? It doesn't have to be $500,000, which is what Barack Obama got left. Okay, let's just think about that. These are his life events. So you think about that. Put this in this context. You have a black president who went to private school, got $500,000 inheritance. He has no connection to slavery. He's not the descendant of a slave, but he's talking about reparations as an authority. He's talking to Black America about reparations. In that sense, you may as well be a white person talking about reparations, because you have no real connection to it. And I can understand how you don't think black people need reparations, because Barack Obama, you didn't have them and you didn't get them. You didn't need them. With $500,000 in your account, why would you need that? In stocks. And I mean, if you want to reference that, you go to the 2009 tax return of Michelle and Barack Obama and you can see what he inherited after his grandmother passed away.
He also wasn't related to any descendants of slaves.
Was not.
I think that matters.
Was not. So he has no connection to slavery except for one ancestor he might have had on his white mother's side who may have been a slave or something like that. But this is a man who has no connection to the legacy of slavery in this country.
No cousins.
He had the life events. He had the life events to make him successful. And think about what it means for you to see yourself through him. For any black person, any African American in this country to see ourselves through Barack Obama. Think about what it means for this little black boy. Remember the little black boy we saw touching his hair? Think about what it means to have a little black boy touching your hair. And thinking that, this guy is just like me and I can be just like him. When truthfully, the thing that you most have in common with him is your skin color and your hair texture. But all of the life events that he had, you don't have. I mean, just think about what that means, and think about what it means in terms of how we have to start viewing life in terms of life events. If you want to be successful and you tell me you want to be successful, you have to think of life in terms of life events. What does that mean? What does it can you let's talk about some other life events. Because wealth is a structure. It's a way of accumulation. That's what it is. So we have to talk about those life events and what those life events mean. And you can't see a person, you don't need to see a person through a prism that doesn't involve life events. So one of the things we talked about inheritance. Barack had inheritance, but we talk about another thing I want to say, can you pay for your kids' education? That's a life event too. Because if you have $50,000 and you can pay for your kids' education, what that means is that you're setting your kid up for success with various life events. You pay for their college, and I'm not saying that you necessarily have you have $50,000 put away. $50,000. If you have $50,000 put away for each kid, you're setting them up to where maybe if they go to a state school, they can say, hey, I've been set up for success. That's one life event. Are you going to at least, if you're not going to leave your child at home, are you at least going to put $20,000 down in that home? Now, all this is per child. These are the kind of life events that are required in order to be successful in a country of historic income inequality. And this is why I always make the argument in favor of reparations. But what I'll say is this as well. You have a lot of people who are parents who have been very selfish. You have parents who have gone to the Essence Festival every summer, every year, and who have taken out second mortgages on their home. So when they die, their kids don't have that house outright. You have parents who have bought themselves matching Harley Davidsons, African Americans, motorcycles, all kinds of things. But when they die, they're not going to leave anything to their kids. These are all life events. These are all life events that we need to talk about and we need to have. Now, at this point in the conversation, I'm going to, if I can get him on the line, I want to bring Antonio Moore in the conversation because we had a conversation about this. We had a conversation about this, which kind of led to this conversation. We started talking about this, and I said, hey, we need to have a show that actually kind of breaks down where we are. So do we have Antonio? I can't see here on my screen. Hey, Antonio.
Hey, how you doing? I hope
I'm doing all right.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought me on. This is a powerful show, and more than necessary for us to have a discussion about everything that people are kind of missing or misdiagnosing about life events, wealth transfers, and how this all goes.
So one of the things I want to ask in terms of life events, right? I mean, can you think of any life events that I may have left out?
Well, let's look at it more in a more simple sense and talk about I interviewed Garrity, professor of economics at Duke, one of the foremost structural economics professors, which is basically intergenerational economist, basically looking at wealth transfers. Then I also talked to Byron Allen, who's now a billionaire. Whether people know it or not, he's absolutely a billionaire. And essentially, what he talked about was life events as well. Now, you can't have a billionaire and a leading economist both say these things, and then we just don't understand it, and we just act like it doesn't matter. It matters substantially. When you look at life events, let's break it down into two areas. One is gifts in vivo transfers. In vivo transfers, in life gifts. Whether we know it or not, whether it's your first car, whether it's cash that's given to you, substantial amounts, whether it's clothes, whether it's your mattress that you don't have to pay for, whether it's life insurance that somebody buys for you. We forget about that. Not just that you receive upon death, but somebody bought you life insurance for your children to have. And that happens. And then on the other side, we see inheritance. And inheritance actually includes, house, stocks, cash, things of the sort. And I think that, we as African Americans so often don't receive inheritance and actually receive negative legacy, having to pay for funerals, that we don't understand how normal that is, especially among the upper echelon of white America.
Yeah, I think we forget how, because we don't have any access to it, right? This is for me, like, this is a consequence of not having access to wealth. Like, if you went to a lot of these weddings and you saw how checks got passed out to brides and grooms at the wedding, and I'm not talking about here's $100. I'm not talking about here's a bassinet for your first kid. I'm talking about real money getting passed around. And part of the problem, it seems to me, is that we don't have access to wealth, so that we don't understand what a true family, like. I want you to go in to tell me, like, what is the point of a family? What we talk a lot about family, what it's supposed to be.
So let's talk about this in numerics. I've done it before, but just to kind of share it with you, the top 10% of white families have about, the top 10%, 8 million white families have $1.4 million hard assets and more, and they spread all across the spectrum. Whereas if you look at the top 1% of black families, that's the only group. We're talking about 14 million black homes, maybe 140,000. I'm gonna go as far as saying 200,000 have more than 1.4 hard. That's for 3 people though. And what you see as a result is these 8 million white homes actually just kind of commune amongst each other. They live in these neighborhoods. They don't really deal with the bottom 40% of white America the same way that when you look over at the black families, that 200,000 that has 1.4 kind of has to deal with their cousin who doesn't have anything. As we've shown before, when you take out durable goods, the middle black family is worth $1,700. So, like, if that's your sister, and somehow by God's chance, you as a result of being a baby boomer that was well timed, with your pension included, are worth $1.4 million. Your sister is something I call an anchor. So you have anchors and balloons. So, like, with black America, even if you do come to a point where you can rise to be a cream of the crop, most of your familial network is an anchor, basically. Whereas if you look at the white side, because there's 8 million with 1.4 or more, what you find is that your network, your surrounding community are balloons to lift you up. When I graduated from law school, I saw it at the graduation. People were getting real gifts. Like, let me pay off all your student loans. Oh, congratulations. I'm not talking about your mom and dad. I'm talking about grandmas. I'm talking about uncles and aunts. And one of the things that we kind of not done in this generation is to be honest about why this generation is struggling so much. We've kind of put it all off as though they're not trying hard, versus really dealing with the reality that the generation before us got lucky in terms of timing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's kind of like where I wanted to start. And the other thing I do want to talk about gifts is it's not always what you see. Gifts are networks. Gifts are what, and I'll talk about Obama in a second, it's legacy admission into a school that you weren't supposed to get into.
Yeah.
These are gifts that come from your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah, and I think one of the dynamics about black life is that we're a very flat group in terms of wealth. And when I say that, when you look at white America, they tier up. So, like, even in terms of our 140 to 200,000 families that are in the $1.4 million above class, the large bulk of them are just at 1.4, and that includes their house. These are not highly liquid assets, because the primary asset is probably a main real estate piece and then a secondary real estate piece. Whereas with the white families, it's businesses, it's stocks, it's all kind of things like that. And so, like, what you find is that the black family is usually a middle manager that rose real high and saved well during the great times of the 80s, and they do have a worth of 1.4, but they don't have a high liquidity. Whereas with the white families, the spread of where they're at, these 8 million homes, it can go anywhere from, somewhere at 1.4, but there's $10 million, there's $25 million, and I'm talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of families at each lane of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I think I want to go into a little deeper in terms of what you said. Well timed. I use the example of even in terms of how a lot of boomers are viewing their own kids, right? They're viewing their own kids as like, why can't you get your stuff together? Like, I did it, and I came about in a time when things were much worse. I came around in a time where things were really awful. So why can't you? I came to the civil rights movement. So why can't you get your stuff together? And it's funny that it's interesting to me when you think about it, because the one example that I use is if boomers were fishing in a pond, right? And that pond had a certain kind of fish, and you knew how to fish for those fish, like you knew how to do it. But then something changed, like somebody kind of switched the fish out in the pond or made them little minnows, and like you can't get full off those little fish. You can't really fish for them. They don't take hooks. They don't respond to anything. So that was one example that I used. But like, what do you make? I mean, what do you say about, the fact that life has changed?
The data that they're using is wrong. I write for inequality.org. It's Institute Policy Studies, an economic think tank. They're actual site, high-level economic thinkers. I've talked to, like I said, Sandy Darity in link, not just the interview that's on my channel, Tone Talks, which you can see, but also off of that talk. And this is just kind of what I do in studying the data. What Thomas Piketty is one of the leading, like, cutting-edge economists out of France. And he wrote a book called Capital in the 21st Century. You should check it out. And what he says is this line: in America today, we have one of the highest wealth concentrations we've seen since the Gilded Age, since the aristocracies. We're not talking about just the 70s. We're not talking about even the Industrial Revolution. We're going back to the aristocracies. And because we can buy things and then push the blame down to our children, when I say that, I mean, and I don't think that parents actively mean to do this, but like, your kid is picking up $100,000 in debt because, it was a college dream that was fed to them, but no savings were made. Whether you could or couldn't, you kind of push that dream on them, and then in a sense, now that they did it, it's not our responsibility to pay for college. Whereas they're competing with groups that do see it that way. Now, secondarily, let's look at the data on where boomers are getting that from and see how that conflicts with the reality of the data behind it. I'm going to share a section with you guys right now from a recent piece that came out on CNN on inequality. When I say recent, it came out 2 days ago. And I kind of broke it out and wrote this little section. In 1970, the bottom 50% of earners took home almost 20% of all the income wealth in America. In 2016, this same group only takes home 12% of all the income. For simplicity's sake, the problem for Black America is twofold. Number one, the large majority of our entire race is in the bottom 50% of earners. And number two, we rely almost wholly on earnings because we as African Americans were and largely are locked out of having generational wealth to buffer the blunt edge of this shit. Literally, over this singular lifetime, we as a race just gained some semblance of equal access to markets. Whites have held as just their own for multiple generations. So, they're just wrong according to the data. Because I mean, you look at 1970, the bottom 50%, which is where we were at then, was taking 20%. So you can take that and you can actually live a reasonable life. Whereas now, the bottom 50%, which we're still at, only takes on 12%. Now you add in the fact that back then there wasn't as much of a pressure to be a consumer, because this is before NAFTA. This is before the Chinese imports. There wasn't an expect to give all these Christmas gifts. There wasn't an Uber, And I think that in so many ways, like I'm not saying that period didn't have its own tragedy in terms of like social impact, but in terms of economic impact, you can make the argument that we're moving to a space that might be, next to as bad as post-slavery. And I'm not talking about the Reconstruction era, I'm talking about the era after that. And, we've been in this cycle for a long time. I sent you a chart to kind of share with everybody. I don't know if Jeremy has that. He should pull it up if he does. That shows the timeline. I mean, we only been free for a lifetime.
Yeah, no, that's true. And there's something very interesting. There's something very interesting that you said too, in terms of, and you said this earlier when we were talking about, African Americans having to bear the risk, right? Of having to, so you bear the risk of capital, being capital and making money. So you go work in a Jeff Bezos warehouse and so he can make this money, and you risk your body or whatever. You go drive Uber so the Uber can be this great company, but you take the risk of being in the front seat and somebody in the back seat could rape you or stab you or do whatever. You're bearing the risk of what creates this capital. And I want to say white capital, but it's really not white capital. It's just capital because, I mean, what other capital is there? So, I want you to kind of expound on that if you can. Like, there's a chart that's just up now. It's about inequality. But I wanted you to expand if you can. Like, what does it mean? Like, have we always done that? Like, that's what we did in terms of building this country. Bear that risk.
Yeah, I think that when you look at slavery and in the other era, which is Slavery by Another Name, as known by Douglas Blackman, and if you haven't picked up the book, at least watch the documentary. It's free on YouTube, Slavery by Another Name. What you understand very quickly is that America created some of the wealthiest people the world has ever known, hands down. I have a list that I have in a piece called Legacy Rises. You can Google that. And in that list, I pull it from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. Of the 75 richest people in the history of mankind, 45 came from America. And what you start to realize is that a lot of their advantage was free labor. You played a clip last week about where Thomas Piketty explains that the land was only valuable because of the slaves. And so, like, essentially, what you see is that, in one sense, if they had just brought us here and say, like the Indians, whether it be killed us or put us in prisons, at least we wouldn't be in play in the marketplace. But in another sense, this is almost more atrocious because you brought us here and now we're competing against our own body's use and creation of capital today.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we created all this capital and now we have to earn like dollars against that capital today in this weakened market. And I just don't understand where I guess when you start to understand the data, I don't understand where 85% of black people really are standing in terms of their understanding of wealth and race. And I think that a lot of where they're standing is they recreate narratives in terms of fantasies rather than realities because they don't know the data. But they're going to know it soon enough because I'm bringing it.
One part of the reason, like Iris just said, we don't feel it, but part of the reason we don't feel it is because we have credit. So credit has sort of masked the lack of data. I mean, the lack of real money, the lack of wealth. It is masked that.
Yvette, one other thing credit has allowed capital to do is take advantage of us in wholly different ways. I mean, you think about this. When student loans came about, they didn't tell a whole generation of black people that you couldn't bankrupt them. They told us that it was good debt. They basically created lifetime indentured servitude through student loans, and they lying about like how it all went down. And I'm not saying that white people don't have it too, but our whole race has it if they try to like strive. And so, like, how do you have student loans that can't be bankrupted, but everything else can be bankrupted, right? Everything else can be bankrupted. It's a trip because you come into this reality, bringing it back to like life events. This era that we're in, life events are critical more than any time probably in the history of the U.S., particularly any time during our freedom. Mm-hmm. It's more critical now than it was during the 70s. Because what happened during the 70s is that labor had a larger share of income. So we could kind of mask our
right on that, yeah.
Through making money. But now labor, like you can become a lawyer, get hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and make $70,000 a year. But if you don't have like a mom, a dad to give you $30,000 for your house, you out. Yeah. And somebody was, I know somebody who went and bought a house with nothing down. And I would say to them, that person is skating. I'm talking about some stability. I'm talking about really going in the way that naturally is supposed to go. And it's funny that you brought up Obama, and I do want to talk about that as well.
I mean, and before we get to Obama, it's very interesting what happens when you don't have the wealth transfers. What happens when you don't have the wealth transfers is that you don't have any stability. So what you see, even when I was looking at a documentary you and I were talking about earlier, where they had a great section about how, black people in the South were migrating to different places because, trying to find opportunity. Well, even now you see that, like, in a lot of areas, you're in California, black people are priced out. So sometimes they stay there and do apartment life, but sometimes they're priced out. They just leave and have to go somewhere else. So we have basically kind of become nomads in a sense because of the lack of opportunity and the lack of access to wealth.
No, I agree, and I just think that in so many ways, this kind of brings it home for me. you have to understand this country today. 8 million white homes have more than a million poor in worth. 8 million. 8 million black homes are worth less than $1,700 when you take out the family car. Think about the gravity. That's 1,000 times multiplier. And like it's crazy. It might even be more than that. It's crazy because I think in so many ways, like we've created a narrative because we know a white person and we giggle with them, but we don't understand that what undergirds them. And what's happening is like actually prescribing African Americans that do go to UCLA, USC, Stanford, they have it worse in some ways. Because in some ways, what ends up happening is they get put into environments that they don't have the tools to compete in. And when I say tools, I'm not talking about mental capacity. I'm talking about wealth transfers. Where's the bread? I'm talking about real wealth transfers where it's like, when you look at Mark Zuckerberg, you get these classes like you can be Mark Zuckerberg. When you look at him, you don't understand that he went to a $40,000 boarding school for the last 2 years of school. Now you might say, well, my kid doesn't really need that. Let me tell you why it matters. That's where you build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you build relationships. My brother works at one of the top schools in LA. And what happens at these schools is that the families intertwine. Do little sleepovers. Your dad does this, my mom does that. Or my mom's dad owns this. And we don't understand any of those elements because we think of wealth as a singular lifetime. And one of the things that's interesting is I'm doing a piece that's coming out on Obama, and it's titled How Obama's Celebrity Masked African American Struggle. And what you see is that even in the thread, I was just reading the comments, people bringing up Mariah Carey or like Oprah. These are celebrities. What you talking about? I'm talking about real money.
Yeah,
When I say real money, I'm talking about like not people who hit the lottery. I'm talking about people who have like real businesses across this country, contracts across this country. But you're bringing up random people who hit the lottery as an example. No, I'll cut out Rolling Stones. Look, I'm gonna concede the Rolling Stones. I'm gonna concede Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, but I'm also gonna concede Oprah and Michael Jordan. The difference though is if you take out Michael Jordan and Oprah, black people have nobody who's making bread. Almost zero.
Yeah, and certainly nobody. Like when people think about real money, they're talking about like this black entertainment money. That's not when you look at when you look at Bill Gates, people say, well, Oprah's a billionaire like Bill Gates. No, she's not. Like he runs a whole industry. Like whole industries are like, what is Bill gonna do? Like what is Tim Cook from Apple gonna do? Like how is this gonna work? Ain't nobody sitting around thinking about what Beyonce gonna do. And there's nothing that she has left in terms of like she doesn't control any resources. Like she doesn't have a bunch of places that sells potatoes and they sell potatoes to McDonald's. So that kid can take over that company of growing those acres of potatoes. Like that's the real wealth. And like we don't speak in those numbers. We speak like, well, she rich. No, we're talking about real wealth, not like just this one generational stuff she's talking about.
And that's the coming back to the wealth transfers. That's one of the pitfalls that black baby boomers are running into. The few black baby boomers that break into that 200,000 group, it's not businesses. It's like a primary real estate piece and a secondary real estate piece. Now the issue that they're having is like white people, they'll have businesses, and I'm not saying that no black people have businesses. That's not what I'm dealing with right now. What I'm dealing with is large-scale businesses that you transfer to your children. We don't have really access to that. That's not all due to our fault. We've been locked out on purpose during Jim Crow. You can see that in my Byron Allen interview, and he discusses that in detail, even what he's dealing with today in entertainment, in terms of owning your own channel. And so, like, what you see is that it's the kind of thing that works for a singular lifetime. Hopefully you make enough, and that's it. It's going to cut off like a water faucet. Whereas white wealth is growing, is flowering. It's almost like a fungus in a sense right now. And the trippy part now, I want to kind of bring Obama into this is, Obama kind of came to us as a celebrity, but he played on a lot of our tropes. There's one line that I'm gonna put in my piece where he tells Netanyahu, who's the Prime Minister of Israel, what he says to the Prime Minister of Israel is, I'm the African American son of a single mother, and I live in this White House. Now the problem, though, this is the problem. Barack Obama inherits $500,000 in stock from his white grandmother. Before I even get to the second component of what I'm going to use as his ultimate like legacy, wealth that he doesn't explain, if there isn't an example of white privilege, that's inheriting $500,000 in stock is that example. There might be 0.5% of black families in the whole country, more like probably 1/4% of all the black families, like 40,000 black families that have $500,000 in stock. There might be like less than half, like 5%, maybe 6 or 7% of all white families have $500,000 in stock. Obama's in that group.
Yeah.
And he received it from his white grandmother. So he received the benefits of white privilege. But then at the same time, we see him through our black lens and allow him to use black tropes that people like myself really had. And that's all gamesmanship. Now let's move to the second component. What we know is that he had decent grades coming out of Columbia. But then he gets into Harvard. I'm not dealing with the Harvard Law Review, and I've read even things about that. But I'm dealing right now with access and admission to Harvard. His dad, in the late 60s, was one of the first masters, and black masters, of economics to come out of Harvard. So when he comes to law school, he can check admission, legacy. That basically boosts you up like 25% of a chance of getting in. And so, like, you've told Netanyahu that you come from a single mother. But in reality, you got a grandma that's gonna leave that left you $500,000. You didn't tell him that, and you got a dad who got you into Harvard, or at least played a major role.
Yeah, legacy.
Sounds like around. Don't sound like a single mother to me. And I'm saying that these are wealth transfer, life events. These are the kind of things that you got to look around as a parent and say, do I have those life events? And if I don't have them, I got to question what I'm telling my kid and pressuring them with to make them feel like they need to do all these things that I don't have. I'm not giving them the tools to complete. When my great-great-grandfather was around, God bless his soul, I didn't meet him, but I know that what was happening was they would take the big parcel of land and they would cut it up. And when you got to a certain age and you wanted to get married, we're going to give you your parcel. I done already taught you how to bring down some corn or to milk a cow, and then you can live on this land. You can be a functional adult with the tools I'm giving you. The land, the skills. What are you doing for your children to make them a functional adult in this changing America? If you're not doing those things, you got to really look at how you're pressuring them. That's just my belief.
Well, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something else, though. You know, we were talking. You know, we were having a conversation about how and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I mean, well, let's drill down on it. We were having a conversation about how the black, you know, we sort of misunderstand, for lack of a better word, family, and what family is supposed to do. And the conversation that we normally have about single motherhood is just like, you know, well, you know, don't talk bad about the girl, you know, she's not, but it's like you're missing the key in terms of the function that family is supposed to provide. So talk to a little bit about that in terms of family and these accidental, you know, for lack of a better word.
So when you look at this, let's look at it from a data point and then come to, you know, a hard statement about it that I don't want nobody to take offense of. 72% of black babies are born out of wedlock today. 72%. On the other side, just looking at white America without looking at the other races, only 27% of white babies are out of wedlock. In and of itself, what a marriage is a combination of families. I mean, like familial wealth. That's why he changed last names. That's why he pays for the engagement dinner and her dad paid for the wedding, so that we're all invested. This is a team family event that's occurring to combine wealth. Because we don't have wealth often, we don't see it as that kind of event. It's two people in love. And I'm not saying love isn't part of it for white America, because it probably is. But I'm saying there's a functional reality behind this thing. So on top of that, the children that come out of this union are set into a nest of possible success. Not guaranteed success, but very, very high likelihood of success. And they get these same transfers. So when you look at our race, what's slowly happening is that, you know, and it's funny because we weren't like this only a generation ago, let alone 2 generations ago. As impoverished as we were, you know, in the 30s and you know, we used to be married a lot more. But what you see is that our race, in large part, is starting to be constructed of mistakes. And when I say mistakes, people who weren't planned to be here. And so, like, two people laid down and they kind of had a child on accident. You have a whole race that's being constructed that way.
But drill down there. You have a whole race that's been constructed by accident. I mean, that's really what you're going to, because when you think about family, one of the most important aspects of family and what it means to be a family is that even if these two people don't have money, if they got married, they projected and envisioned what they wanted their family to look like. This is the person that I want to be my wife or husband or whoever, partner, whatever. This is the person that I want. This is the person that I choose. And this is the kind of life that I foresee us having. That's a very deliberate act, as opposed to, oops, I got pregnant. And that's an accident. And that isn't a good way to build any kind of structure in life, any kind of wealth either, regardless.
Yeah, and when you add in the fact that we descend from slaves, it aggregates the impact. So, like, you descend from slaves, and then also you were mistakenly, like, brought to this world, and that doesn't mean you're an utter failure, but it means that your likelihood of having tools to be able to compete at a high level aren't that high. And then, so, like, when nobody is, like, addressing it and saying what that means in terms of how do I adjust this to give this kid a chance, that's kind of where we're at. Nobody's talking about what that means in terms of, 72% of our babies are born out of wedlock. I was born out of wedlock. I was born out of wedlock, and in many ways, I see the life events that didn't happen. And I don't think that just wedlock is enough for African Americans, because of course we were locked out of wealth, and also we were slaves. But I think that this plays a major component in aggravating and basically enhancing the impact of issues that we already had before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Like, when you just said about your own life, you said I was born out of wedlock, and you talked about, like, what didn't happen because of, like, your family circumstance. And it's very interesting. Like, my parents were married, and I didn't have the kind of life events, of course, that white people have. But, like, I was gifted a car. You know what I mean? I was gifted, a new car. Not like, I was gifted, like, first a used car and then a new car. That's not something that I had to. That's a bill that I didn't have to pay. Right? Even something as basic as if something go down with me, I can go home. Like, my parents own, their home. You know what I mean? It's not like, it's not like they're just kind of scattered and it's like, well, I'm living with my girl and, you know what I mean? My old lady, So, I mean, just in terms of that.
What's the trip about that is, coming of age and being I'm an attorney here in Los Angeles. I call, this city's very interesting for a number of reasons. I don't want to take the show left, but, like, our black population saw appreciation in homes that you didn't see in too many places across the country. And we also had something that I tell everybody, look up, Prop 13, which allowed them to kind of skate by around gentrification in a way. But, like, it's the most interesting thing to talk to other blacks, particularly in California as a whole, that did achieve as much as I achieved, because they don't know that they got all these gifts.
Yeah.
And they sit and they kind of give judgment, and they don't know that they give judgment. And, like, it's weird because it's like, do you not understand that almost like all of Black America lives this way? But they don't, because, we only have eyeline, like, so, like, Ladera Heights is one of the wealthiest communities in Black communities in America. That's here in Los Angeles. Well, if you're in Ladera Heights and you got another 300 families that you kind of around, and all y'all have been doing well, and all y'all have some life events, private school, downs on houses, you think that Black America is living that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You like the white person that got one black friend. That's small. But then you're the person that's most likely to go speak for us, like Obama is speaking for us. So Obama's speaking on reparations for people who won't never get $500,000 in stock. And I think that, I don't want to hold the show too much, and I definitely appreciate you having me on. But the one key that is interesting about the point y'all brought up earlier is Obama does have 3 slave owners in his white side. So, like, you have a guy who actually has more connection to slavery through slave ownership than slavery, speaking about slavery because he looks like a descendant of a slave.
Yeah, no, and I think, I think now is probably the best time to talk about it. Like I tried to talk about it in like 2010, 11 or somewhere around there, and I just got shot down because I don't think people were ready. And you and I have talked about how there wasn't really a space for it. But I think we're at a point now when now that now that we know he didn't really do anything, and I think he was actually detrimental to the black community. But now that we know, I think we can now peel back those layers and sort of talk about who he is. But I'm gonna let you say anything that final points. But one thing I want to ask you, and this is gonna come up just because of the criticism that we get most of the time. So this is gonna come up. So the question becomes like, what is the solution?
Okay, before I answer the solution, I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that I say Black America is a mistake. I think a lot of it comes from a historical consequence. But in terms of like looking at it in terms of data and looking at it in terms of structural like positioning, we have become a race that isn't doing things based on planning. And if you already don't have much in terms of like a reservoir, and then on top of it, you're not even planning for certain things to happen. You're just hoping that everything works out once it kind of like happens, and you're in an environment where you already have a low probability even if you plan. And so I just wanted to say that first. Now, as far as the solutions, I've talked to Professor Darity. His solutions include everything from baby bonds, where you would give more, like the government would give a certain amount to all the babies. If you come from a family with less, you get more. But if you come from a family with more, you don't get nothing almost, or less. And then that just aggregates. The only problem I have with that is I think capital is so manipulative that it will try to usurp the money of the poor. I think that we need something specifically targeted at our race. I think reparations needs to be discussed. Byron Allen has brought up stuff like when he came to Obama. I wrote a piece with Byron Allen called "The 8 Solutions to Make America Great Again." He gave that to Obama. In this piece, he's telling Obama things that you can do without Congress. Block the mergers. Lock the mergers until the cable mergers until they actually include black people. That didn't happen. So I believe that some of the solutions I'm looking past that just weren't done, Obama could have blocked the mergers. Those would have gave us channels owned by black people. And it's not even just about creating super capitalists. All of a sudden now we have cable networks that are black owned getting our messages out again. And then we can actually have dialogue. Because I think we can't even talk about how do you close the gap, because the gap is so exponentially wide that we just got to have a dialogue on what the gap is. And it's funny because so often I think that nobody wants to see information as the first step of solution. And with this kind of gravity of problem, information is the first step.
Yeah.
It's not about just investing in the stock. This is black people, and I'll leave it on this. Black people are approaching this like the middle black family is worth $85,000 and the middle white family is worth $120, and all we need is some twist of the screws to kind of catch up and get to the 100 range. The middle black family today, I'll come back to it, without the family card and the couch, is worth $1,700. The middle white family, funny enough, might inherit the couch and the car, and I'll leave it on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right in terms of where we are, and I think that last point that you brought home was really important. Like the first step of any solution is to have the information. But I think, and I get a lot of that too, in terms of we're kind of so desperate to get a solution so quick, because we just started talking about like this. Like I talked about Obama in terms of politics for a long time. People didn't listen. I tried to explain to them politics isn't exchange. Politics is transactional, right? And I tried to do that, and it didn't necessarily work for a lot of people. But this conversation that we're having in terms of the in terms of the data, in terms of the financials, is a very sort of a different conversation, and nobody's been having it. Nobody's having it, and we just started having it. So why are you trying to rush from this to the solution?
Yvette, and I was going to not say anything else. Well, two things. There has been discussion by people like Darren Hamilton, Sandy Darity, Chuck Collins on inequality.org, who wrote the 228 years piece with Diedrich, who's also my face. There's been discussion by some, but these are discussions that Black America
Well, there are discussions that Black America doesn't have. I put Sandy Darity's, stuff up on my page. But the thing about it is, when I went to that page that he had said that, where he had made that speech, it had like 700 views. Like, that's, nobody's been listening. So, I mean, now that we're getting it out, and now that we're finally like broadcasting it and say, hey, this is what you need to hear. These are the people that you need to listen to. And people are trying to rush through that and say, well, just no, I hear you, but just tell me the solution. Like, yeah, I heard you say that yesterday. So tell me the solution. No, you got to first really understand this and digest this information before you can move on to that.
And I know you got to go forward, but I sent you a piece before from Salon on the pyramid schemes. And like, Black people consider hustling, they're confusing like schemes and hustles with like business. And there's a difference. And like, it's funny because if anybody wants to look up the piece, it's called Behind the Pyramid Schemes, Broken Families in Struggling Communities. And it's just a discussion of how these little, get-rich-quick schemes are really a way of capital, again, taking advantage of your aspiration. And there's one section
and desperation.
It's a big thing. And it's one of the most, like, profound things that I've read in the last 2 weeks. It's very short. And it's about a young Black guy named Sean who lives in the hood and walks out of a store, and the guy wants to sign him up to a pyramid scheme involving culinary things, knives or something of the sort. And he says, and why not? Sean was young, a great communicator, energetic, and from the hood, which can make one practically immune to rejection. Immune to rejection.
Yeah.
It's an attribute that could be paid great dividends in the world of sales. So, like, that's kind of like our role in this society. We're willing to do anything.
Yeah, because of aspiration and desperation. Like, aspiration and desperation is our life. So we're aspirational because we've been told we need these things, and we do want things, and who doesn't want to have a secure life? And so that leads to desperation. Like, why am I not getting this? Like, why is it, so let me go and do this other little scheme, this MLM marketing scheme. Let me go try this out. I'll try out whatever. While we were talking, I was watching the YouTube comments, and somebody said something about negative wealth, saying that, yeah, my auntie my auntie, she had to use credit cards to kind of bury my mom. Like, this is negative. Like, you're taking money away, right? And so that's kind of where we are. And so, I mean, I want to thank you, Antonio, for coming on. I appreciate it. I appreciate you driving home the fact that wealth is, this is about communities. It's not about the individual. You don't have enough. I don't care if you live to 100. Like, most of the time, there's not enough time in your one life to do it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me just take a moment while we're in here. If you all are watching this on Facebook or YouTube, please take the time to share. It looks like sometimes that, like, we're not just here talking. The thing about me, the thing about Antonio is that we actually take the time out of whatever we're doing to kind of research and exchange ideas, exchange articles, exchange books. I mean, and that in and of itself, that takes energy, that takes effort. So we got
someone, they can't hear me now, but we got someone that's saying it's the Jordans.
So, but just if you could take the time to just kind of subscribe to the Facebook page. To the YouTube page, like the YouTube page. If you're on Facebook right now, if you have not already, just share the video, like the page, share it with your friends. I'll share the Patreon to donate after this video processes and everything on the YouTube. And I will also share, you can go to breakingbrown.com at any time. You can donate one time, or you can donate cyclical to kind of keep the money coming in. You can, for as little as $3 a month, for as high right now as $25. And so, take the time to do that. We like we said, money.
So someone's saying it's the Jordans. It's our consumer.
It's not the Jordans. Like, it's not nobody's saying that you should buy Jordans. Nobody's saying that you should buy $300 Jordans. I'm just so upset that after everything we just said, after the conversation we just said, like, why can't, like, somebody came back and said Jordan. Like, I just don't understand what happened to, like, the intellectual curiosity. Like, go look at some of the stuff we shared. We shared like 3 or 4 links up there. Like, why? Just go look at that and read that instead of just being like, it's the Jordans. That's like an easy out. Nobody's saying that you should buy Jordans. I'm not saying you should buy any kind of $300 tennis shoe. But even if you don't get the Jordan, what that means is that by not getting the Jordan, that means that you will maybe have $300 extra. So when it's time to pay your light bill, you might have more money for your light bill. But it's not going. That's not creating wealth. That's not what that means. Like if you're trying to save up to $1,000, which I think is great, like don't get the Jordans. But we're talking about something bigger than that.
Alright, so you have another video on your channel right now about Tracy Silverstein, and apparently someone was upset about that video and what you say about Tracy Silverstein, also known as Tracy Ellis Ross, in that video. Now, you have nothing personal against Tracy Ellis Ross. I believe the point was, don't confuse yourself with Tracy Ellis Ross. Just like don't confuse yourself, black people, with Barack Obama. And these are for reasons, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're kind of hiding behind, like, it's not about, it's just the fact that, you don't tell us that you changed your name back to your mother's name. You don't tell us that your father, he was Jewish and he was well-to-do. And all of this stuff, like it's just like it's the same thing with Obama. Like, don't act like you're me, or Antonio or anybody else. Like you had a totally different life experience. So we need to understand the stuff that you had in terms of having a Jewish father who had some money and having a mother who was an R&B icon that most African Americans, 99.9% won't have. We have to start seeing the people through the prism of not just the fact that we like them, but what they have that we might not get. And we probably won't get, right? You have to see them through that prism as opposed to just like, I'm going to be just like, no, like, and then ask yourself, why don't I have it and how can I get it? And so we don't have like these wealth transfers because we didn't get money. Like our ancestors didn't get money for what they were paid. They didn't get free land anyway. There was a great article about how much of white homes and property can be traced back to like land grants and America giving property away to white people. A lot of what they have can be traced back to that. So you have to ask yourself, like, why when you ask yourself, why don't I have it? The answer is really clear for me. Like, we don't have it because when you work for free, you don't get to accumulate money. Like, that's not how any of that works. Like, so I understand why we didn't get it. And you have to ask yourself, you don't just beat yourself up and be like, oh my God, I didn't get that. I don't have what they have and it's going to be hard. And I'm like, why didn't I get it? And how do I get it now? And how do we organize towards getting it now? And how do we, and I think that was the opportunity missed with Obama. I think that was the opportunity that was missed with him in terms of what we could have made him do by saying, you know what, I'm not, you should just campaign like any other candidate. Don't try to leverage blackness and do all this stuff. Just be like the guy you were when you were at the law review. Be that guy. Don't try to be this guy. Don't try to, but he wouldn't have won like that. Like if he had been that guy, he wouldn't have won. So that's the big deal. So we're gonna take some calls.
To have people talking about wealthy black individuals through time, like C.J. Walker. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about.
But the reason we know all these people's names, like C.J. Walker, is because there's only one, or only two. Like every few years go by and you get 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's another. The reason, like you don't, like you ask any white person, name all the millionaires, or name all the people that make like upwards of 6 figures, like 750. If they can, they don't. I can't name just one. Like I don't know what you mean. Like, well, we'll name just one person that makes 6 figures. I mean, what you mean? I know the reason we can name everyone is because we don't have many. If we had a whole community of these people, we wouldn't even know. We wouldn't even know. So we ready to take some calls? I mean, that's just.
I'll call you on the air.
Hello.
How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Hey, I want to talk about something that you were talking about earlier about the African American and Africans that actually came from African countries. Okay, so your topic that you actually talked about is very important. Reparation. Reparation is important. I believe that African Americans should be compensated based on how they were treated. Slavery and everything like that. So,
I can't hear him.
But
Okay. I think he's an African guy.
I'm an African.
Okay. Next caller.
So,
sorry, caller. There was a problem with the connection.
I mean, I can't understand.
hello?
Hello, caller. You're on. Caller 3, you're on.
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Hello?
Yes, you're on. Hello?
Okay, I'm on.
Yes.
Wow, what happened to the gentleman that was just speaking?
He's gone.
Oh, Okay, I must have missed what he said. I'm sorry about that. It's kind of hard to be on the phone and hear. I can hear you clearly, but I can't really hear the callers clearly.
I understand.
So I'm sorry about that.
That's not your fault.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
That's not your fault.
Okay, so well, I didn't know if maybe he said something erroneous and you let him go. So I'm sorry about that.
No, I couldn't really hear him, so I let him go.
Yes, your guest brought out, which everything he said, I understand it, and it's absolutely true that we, and people don't understand that we have been systematically locked out of any type of avenue that could have brought us wealth. We were just locked out of it. And now, within the last 20 years, we have been kind of pushed over. And I think this is another problem that has cheated us out of an opportunity to get somewhere financially. And that is the influx of immigrants and illegal immigrants into our neighborhoods who have taken over businesses that we could have eventually had, because I know in the area that I grew up in the Chicago area, all those businesses along those stores on, especially on Madison Street, Pulaski Street. Madison tended to be Caucasian people there, but you had blacks that worked there. But Pulaski, they were those little mom pop stores. They were black owned stores, and now it's all Arabs that own those stores. And that don't live in the neighborhood. So, people are going to those stores. The Arabs are getting the money and going out of the neighborhood and putting nothing back. So that's and this is all over. This is just not in Chicago. This is multiplied all over, especially in your big cities. That's concentrated with Black Americans. So it's just been one thing after another, and people just don't understand it. I was watching a program today with Mr. Ted Haynes on, and he was speaking about how immigration hurt blacks. And it was a Latino woman who she's all for, open borders and all of that. And she just matter-of-factly brought out that, but that was slavery. That was a long time ago. Oh. She don't understand how that is in effect today. I almost reached through the phone.
But you know what, caller? You know what, caller? The thing is that you could never do that. I said you could never do that, though. See, the thing is, like, she can say that to you, that slavery is a long time ago, but you could never tell her, look, listen, I don't, all this stuff you talking about, you're not, you just got to be a citizen last week, so I don't want to hear it. Like, you could never tell her that, or you're not here. You could never say that to her. Like, we're not allowed to do that. Like, our speech is policed, but she can tell you that, even though it's not true.
I'm like, and just matter of fact, she couldn't understand how immigration, legal and illegal, has hurt Black Americans. She just couldn't get it. And so you think that Black Americans would take low-skilled jobs? We were janitors, and we worked at the restaurants, and we worked at the hotels. What do you mean? Those jobs brought us money. Now, did it bring us wealth? No, but it stabilized our household. But now there's no financial stability in our households today. Forget about wealth. There's just no stability. You go into inner cities and people are just walking around, like you said. We're like nomads now. We just walk around. And I'm like, oh my goodness, somebody is not getting it. And you're talking about reparations. There's other people that are talking about reparations. Everybody's talking about reparations. But I think people need to get together and make it happen. It has to happen. But, everybody seems to be in their own little, which is doing well. But you're on breakingbrown.com, and somebody else over here is on something else, and somebody else is over here on something else. But your listeners, we have to mobilize them, because you all have listeners who agree with you, and you're all saying the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your call. But I agree. That's why I said that I was gonna. I took some ideas and said I was gonna let's put together a black agenda. And I want I want to thank everybody who has sent me emails. If you want to send something, send it to editor@breakingbrown.com. I want to thank everybody who has already sent in black agenda items that they want to be added to the list, and we'll do that because I think we have to have something to organize around. And I'm just not a person who's too keen about organizing around other people's lists. I would rather the list that I have come from the people who watch my show and myself and people like Irony and people like that. I don't want a list that somebody else created. I want us to what this show is to me is kind of a think tank. Like I listen to you and you tell me what your problems are. And I like the fact, and I want you to continue doing this, telling me what your problems are in terms of what region you come from. Because the problem in Chicago isn't the same problem in LA, isn't the same problem in Atlanta, isn't the same problem in the Midwest, isn't the same problem in the Northeast necessarily. So, I'm just trying to take that and digest it and kind of put it into something that we can coalesce around. And so, but I think she's right. Like we need to organize, so that we can have some type of stability. Stability is like wealth is properties of communities, not individuals. And that's part of the problem. We don't understand that stability, like wealth is the property of communities. It's not the property of individuals. We keep trying to do, I'm going to do my thing. No, wealth is a community thing. You're not just going to do your thing. That's just not how it works. We have to do this thing together or like we kind of fail. And so that's kind of why I don't like the sentiment that like, where there is no African American community. Well, there is. The key is that we need to know who to purge from that community. Like we have functionaries and misleadership. We have all kinds of people that don't need to be here anymore. So, and be in our group anymore. We need to say, well, you can't have a leadership position. You still black, you still African American, but you can't have a leadership position because of who you are and what you've done.
They can be in the group, they just can't speak and own the group. We don't want Barack Obama speaking and owning the black legacy in America. Is that right?
No, I don't even want Barack Obama in a leadership position. Like, no, I would prefer Obama like he had been a professor and never like engaged in politics ever. I don't even know how great a professor but that's just not, I don't want him in that position. And there are a lot of people who need to be purged. Doesn't mean we don't have a community. I think we do. I think we need to build and make our institutions work for us. We talk about HBCUs. We talk about Black church. All those institutions don't need to work on the behalf and the behest of the African American community. So I do think we have communities. I just think we have a lot of people who are leveraging those communities and those institutions in that community. These institutions to benefit themselves in terms of patronage and not the wider community. And that's the problem for me.
All right, so we're going to get in front of something right now because as soon as Barack Obama exits, the most prominent political black person in these United States is going to try to own the black legacy. And do you want to know what that person's name is?
Who?
It's one Miss Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is going to say, I speak for black people. We don't need anything.
I just want, listen, this is what I want Kamala to do. Kamala, don't be a black candidate. Let's just not do that. Like, the one thing we talked about on my page is that Kamala's, I think her daddy was Jamaican.
He was a Jamaican economics professor at Stanford.
He was a Jamaican economics professor at Stanford. Now again, that's not us. And her mother was what, Indian?
Indian doctor.
Again, you're dealing with a person an Indian doctor and an economist. These are her parents, right? So, and she has, and she has no connection to African slavery on the African American chattel slaves. No connection. That's another Obama. Now, I'm not saying that Kamala Harris can't run for whatever she run for. Just don't run. Just don't run as a sister girl. I know you went to Howard, did whatever you did because you were planning for this moment. There's a lot of that going around. But just don't run as a black candidate, African American candidate. Just run as Kamala. Like that's what I want you to. I don't want you to come. I don't want you to try to dance. I don't want you to try to sing no Al Green. I don't want you to dance no G. I don't even want you to ski week. What the AKAs do, and I don't do none of that. Just be yourself. Just be Kamala. I want you to play some Bruce Springsteen in the background and just see if people will vote for you without you leveraging the capital of the African American community. Let's see if we can do that because we've had enough of that. And we don't get anything out of that. And you come from two well-to-do people. You come from a doctor and an economist. So, I don't want you leveraging the legacy of what it means to be African American in this country. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to just do what you do. Do what you do when you're not campaigning. That's what I want you to do. Just do what you do. Run as a candidate. Like, be post-racial.
Well, okay.
Be at least post-African American.
This is where Yvette and I differ. I think she can ski weed, would do that AKA thing.
I don't think so.
She's a
Take it
legit
away.
AKA. It's just all the other stuff.
No, you're still leveraging it though. Like you still like that's an African American legacy. I'm not saying you can't go there and do that, but why does that have to be the thing that you leverage when you talk to me? Like, why can't you tell me like what you're gonna do for my community? Like, why do you have to leverage my vote by doing something that you think I like because I'm a black woman? So you think you can do some Delta AKA stuff even though I didn't pledge? But you think you can do that and for me to be like, oh, she's a real sister. I'm not going by that real sister stuff no more. Because if you don't have what I want you to have in terms of policies, none of that matters to me. It hadn't mattered to me in a long time. But none of that matters to me. Like, I would rather have a white guy who says, Yvette, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for the black community. I'm going to get this for African Americans. I'm going to fight for this. I'm going to fight for this. And he can give me a list of stuff he's going to fight for African Americans. I'd rather have him than just have somebody who's there because she's one of mine or she's a sister girl. I don't care about that anyway.
And Kamala Harris, she came out and said pretty clearly that no, she's not going to fight for black people.
Well, there's a tweet. There's a tweet up on her page where she quotes Obama from the Ta-Nehisi Coates piece, "My President is Black," where she says, and Obama says something about doing stuff for all people. She says, yes, you have to do stuff for all people, blah, 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 which is really just a dog whistle and a signal. Like, I'm not going to be the candidate of black people. Even when Van Jones mentioned her, he mentioned her in terms of she's going to stand up for the dreamers. And then a little bit later he said, and she's going to do stuff for African Americans. It's like it was an afterthought. Like, why is the first? Well, if that's who you are, if you plan on doing stuff for dreamers, that's your deal. But don't try to act like that's my deal. Like that's something I should be excited about. That's not something that African Americans should be on our priority list of the first 100 things we should be in favor of. That ain't on there. So I think we have to start really thinking about that. So we got another call.
Yeah, we got it.
I want to get them through. I want to get people on.
Give the people a voice. You're on,
Yes.
caller.
Hey, caller.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Hey, I just want to let you guys know I really appreciate what you guys do. I've been watching you, Yvette, and for a while now, and
Thank you.
I'm in much agreement with what you guys have to say. I'm an engineer. I like to start off on that basic point. My family are engineers, and that matters, man. If you have people in your family doing a certain thing, coming from a certain standard, you want to kind of live up to that standard, and your parents are going to hold you to that standard too. Those who run from it are running, in the opposite direction sometimes. But what I want to say is, you're right about generational wealth. It's passed down. It's in a state like where I live in Mississippi. It's very tough. It's a have or have not state. You either are working or in the mode of the working class, or you're on welfare, and it's so tough. And as far as getting reparations, I think it's going to be very difficult if not the older generation of ourselves make that sacrifice to go all out for it. I mean, how is the younger version of us going to stand for that fight if they see the ones of us who are the oldest and needed the most not stand up with us? And, it's so tough because, if your family members say, do as I say, not as I do, that may have worked in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But we as the youth, we like to see action. So if you leading me by example, it makes that much of a difference.
I agree.
Again, it's very tough to quantify how much what you guys said about relationships, those standards, going to private schools, going to certain schools. I mean, that's going to directly impact who you are as a person and the relationships you establish. Again, I just want to let you guys know I really appreciate and wanted to expound on it. Just wanted to let you guys, I love your show. Keep it going. But I just want to give a little input in that way too.
I know. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, caller. Thank you. It's always good to hear that like somebody's paying attention. So I definitely appreciate the call. And yeah, it does matter. It does affect the kind of person you can be and the kind of community that you're a part of. Some people talk about, well, it takes 3 generations to create wealth. Well, where were you 3 generations ago? Where were your people? And even then, like, they keep moving the goalposts. Like, I have somebody tell me that, like,
oh my God.
Say what you say,
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I mean, as soon as you think, oh man, this is where I need to be at this point.
it gets that much harder to get to that point because the goalpost keeps moving, like you said. Oh, they said you need to have $1 million. Now you need to have $10 million before you retire. Okay, so this is what I do. Before I started learning about economics, my mom was an engineer. She didn't really teach me as much as I thought I needed to know about economics, about financial needs, about those things. So when I started working as an engineer, I started saving money. My mom was a single parent, by the way, so we lived like lower middle. So it wasn't like we had everything. We lived in an okay place, didn't have crime a lot, was safe, but we didn't have everything. You know what I'm saying? So I had an old beat up car for my first car. It was one of those situations, but still not terrible at all. But my mom was so busy trying to do everything that she didn't teach us some of the things that I think now are very important since I started my family. So I have friends that are engineers, friends that are, in computer science, friends that are doing certain things and doing well for themselves, and I'm very proud of that. And what I tell them is, man, at this point, it's going to take us really being conservative with our money, saving and investing our money properly. Like I tell these guys, man, we need to come together in like 20 years and start an LLC or something where we can start buying up property and then, establishing a resource that we can own and at least trade with other people. And at least showing our kids how to do the same thing. Because again, like I watch you guys, I watch Voice, I watch Tone. You guys do a magnificent job of illustrating these things. I mean, a magnificent job.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to let you know we are trying. I'm trying to get some guys together. The youth are listening. The ones who do have jobs, we're trying to galvanize them as well.
Okay.
So it's a process, and we're just trying.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think this is doing. I think this is what has to happen. I mean, he said something very interesting about his mom being an engineer and talking about, she did the best she could and all of that stuff, but he didn't get everything he needed. And that's what communities are about. It's like combining resources. Like, no, that's why you want, if you can, to have two people in the home, to have two parents in the home. That's why you want a community that supports you, right? So that's what you need. So, I mean, right. Even when people talk about STEM all the time. Well, the thing is, like, nobody was really talking about that when I went to school, but now you change the goalpost again. It's like, well, you should have done this. The problem is you should have done this. The problem is always the black person. Anytime I run into somebody who always says African Americans are the problem, like, you're the problem. Like, that's always the way it goes. But I want to thank you for calling in. Crazy.
Next caller?
Yep. Hey, caller.
Hey, hello. This is Joseph from Atlanta. How you and I are doing tonight?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing good. I really want to pose a question rather than make a statement because I'm a little confused about, immigration. And I'm not even talking about, uneducated, low-skilled worker type education, but, more immigrants that are on the upper social economic ladder in terms of business owners, and particularly like the caller from Chicago said a couple callers ago, how the businesses are owned by, immigrants. And I'm like, when you try to go to a bank as a black American, for a small business loan, there's a whole lot of barriers that you have to overcome. First of all, the application, you got to put the Social Security number down. They're going to use that Social Security number to run your complete financial history. Not just your credit score, your FICO score, all that, but they're going to want to know how well you paid your bills, how much money you got in the bank. They're going to look at your bank statements going back X amount of years. And all that stuff conspires to deny, I don't know what the percentage would be of black applicants for trying to get capital through banks. They get denied. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, how do these immigrants come here and get these same loans? I don't know if they're getting it through the Small Business Association or whatever, but they're getting loans from the government when they don't have a history of these people in terms of their financial statements. They don't have anything because they come from other countries. How do they know what their credit score would be, even if there's such a thing as a credit score in whatever country they come from? How do they know they can give these people money and they're going to pay it back? Because they use these standards as a way to deny black people access to capital. But when these people come over from other countries, they have that capital to get into these businesses, owning all these businesses in the black community. But there doesn't seem to be any of those same exact barriers that I just described to keep them from having access to capital. So maybe Irony might know about this if you don't, Yvette.
Well,
but could someone please explain how they're able to come over here and access capital without having to go through the same hurdles that we would have to go to if we go to a bank trying to get access to capital to start a business?
You're not gonna get no access to capital in Mexico. But let me just say one thing before I get to the crux of what you said. Like, the first thing that I say is that under Obama, his SBA, in terms of small business loans, it's Small Business Administration, black people only got 1% of the loans from SBA. Under the Obama administration, under your first black president, we only got 1% of the loans. Under George W. Bush,
you got 8% under George Bush.
You better preach.
8% under Bush. Preach.
Now, what I will say is that sometimes you don't even know where the money come from. Like sometimes you don't know whether they're pooling that money or whether they get a family member to co-sign. And you got to understand, like, nobody wants to really say this, but if you're a new immigrant, like, you're not socialized like Americans in terms of what your expectations are. You can't even move like Americans move if you don't really have your green card. You can't move like that. So another thing people don't want to talk about is, like, this is kind of, in some ways, kind of a third world economy in terms of what's happening, in terms of how they move. So I don't necessarily know where they get that money, but I know if they get it from the SBA, that's a problem. Because it's almost like in people, you can't really have these conversations because people say, oh, you're just being xenophobic. It's almost like, you know how they have immigrants from Syria now and everybody says they're safe? And I just want to know how, because, like, Syria's a mess right now. Like, how would you know, like, a Syrian immigrant is fine? Like, based on what background check? And
the thing about it, Yvette, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to interject just one thing, and then I'm going to get offline and just listen to whatever you have to say. And I don't know if this is true, so maybe you and Irony could shed some light on it. But I've been told on numerous occasions over the years, going back, a couple decades. I'm in my mid-40s. Going back a couple of decades, that when immigrants come over here from other countries and they set up these businesses, they don't have to pay taxes for X amount of years. I don't know what the amount of years is. And there's a loophole to get around when that time expires. They transfer the business over to another family member who's more newly immigrated here, who's still under that time, hasn't passed by for them yet. They transfer the business over into their name, so now they still don't have to pay taxes. So I just wanted to pass that on to you as well.
Thank you.
I just want to get offline and listen to you guys' response.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Was a very smart person. I just pulled up something that says grants for immigrants. Grants for refugees and immigrants, including instruction for English language learners, citizenship and integration programs, immigrant women, immigrant parenting, education, and early immigrant education childhood programs. So apparently,
in those integration programs, do you think they're learning how to stand up for black people?
Nope.
That's not part of integrating into American society?
Nope.
Standing up for black people is not like a must for citizenship or a must for the American
Not
experience?
Not at all. They're learning how to do what they need to do. They're learning how to grants, money. Isn't that something? Grants for immigrants. Like, we can't get.
I'm just discouraged. I'm just discouraged because I'm tired of. I live in Southwest Atlanta, and everywhere you go in the black community in Southwest Atlanta, you got all these little mom and pop stores, and when you go inside, it's either someone from an Arab country, someone from an Asian country, someone from a Latin American country, and you're like, some of them can't even speak the language. How do they get all this money to start all these businesses when they employ their own people? And in the same neighborhood, you got this high unemployment rate for black people who cannot go and get these same loans that these people get to be able to set up all these different businesses. And it's like, I'm just tired of seeing it. It's not that I don't like immigrants. They're in black neighborhoods where black people are not working and they're working. How are you working in my neighborhood and I can't even have a job in my neighborhood because I'm being denied access to capital, but you're not?
No, you're exactly right. Like, we've been here 400 years free labor, and now we get replaced with other communities. I agree with you, Colin.
No, the problem isn't that we don't like immigrants. It's that I don't like hearing that there's not enough money for black businesses, or there's not enough money to get the lead out of water in black communities, but we have money for these other things.
Yeah, we have money for grants. We have money to integrate immigrants into the
community.
Okay,
I'm going to get off of that so you can get the next caller. I'm going to get off now.
I appreciate it. But I think, let me tell you one of the problems is that really, really bothers me. One of the problems that really bothers me is that when black people start talking about how, yes, I have a problem with what's going on in my community, how do they have jobs and we don't have jobs? then you get beat back by the Democratic Party as being xenophobic or anti-immigrant. No, I'm trying to find out why I cannot get a job. Like, but when I say that, you get beat back. So, and I think, you know, this era, you know, black people kind of fell for the era of political correctness because they thought it would check white supremacists. What's happened though is that we can't say anything. Like, we can't say anything. Like, it's not possible for us to kind of have a conversation because, you know, because we're automatically xenophobic. The minute I started talking about what's best for African Americans, everybody from Latinos to black immigrants, everybody started, oh, Yvette hates immigrants. Well, listen, I don't hate anybody, and I will ally with anybody. I don't have any kind of inherent bias. But, you know, I want what's best for my community, and I don't see that as problematic. And if you see that as problematic, then maybe we should just part ways. I'm not gonna kowtow to you and be like, well, what you think? What you mean? Are you upset with me? I don't care. So, I mean, just move on. It's okay. We don't have to like each other. We just gotta do business.
Next caller.
Yep. Hey, caller.
You're on.
Hello, Yvette. This is the young doc again.
Hey, how you doing?
I like to listen to this show. It's just amazing. But I wanted to shout out the Funky Academic before I make my single same statement. I feel like the wealth gap, you can even notice it in education. And I'm not talking about like upper levels of education, but like in these neighborhoods where they speak about how schools are closing down. Schools don't close down as easily as they do in the suburbs. They're doing funding for suburbs. But I was literally at lunch a few days ago, and I would hear teachers. I overheard some, you know, lighter complexion teachers sitting across from me speak about these students, and they were talking about how students, they only feel like they were doing something if they're doing worksheets, and how I don't know how to teach someone that figures that they'll die and they won't make it to the age of 30. And it was like, we're in an inner city community, and it speaks to how your heart is towards the students that you're teaching. But we would, if this community had money and generational wealth, you wouldn't get these teachers. These teachers wouldn't, and if you get them, they definitely wouldn't speak like this because they know who pays them. The issue is the money that pays these teachers doesn't come from the community. It does by tax dollars, but they don't feel like they're working for. They don't feel like servants of the community. They feel like they're providing you some type of charity by working for these underserved communities, and that speaks to generational wealth. Because if my mother doesn't make so much, so we didn't have grandmother and grandfather and things like that, it's like I feel like I'm coming to teach you in your community, and I feel like I'm doing you a favor, whereas your tax dollars and your mother's tax dollars are paying me.
No, I agree with you. Thank you. I appreciate you, Doc. Thank you for calling back in. No, I agree. Like, it's like you know, that's what like Teach for America, that little thing that's putting so many black teachers and Chicago teachers and everybody out of business. Right. That organization is putting so many trained teachers out of business, and that's what it is. They just come in and it's like, you know, well, I'm just doing something to get my college loans down. I just want to be able to tell my friends, when I leave this community, I did something for the blacks. You know, that's not the kind of teacher I want. I want you to be in the trenches. I want you to be a teacher. I want this to be your vocation. And I want to support teachers, good teachers. We had so many black teachers in Chicago get kicked out, get out of a job, schools closed under Rahm Emanuel, who was Barack Obama's chief of staff. That's what Barack Obama's going to go home to if he ever does go home to Chicago. I don't even think Obama can go home to Chicago. You can't come home no more. I don't think you can come home no more after your city looks worse than when you left it. And the reason they voted for Rahm Emanuel because he was your boy. You put him in there. Like, you've been such a disaster, Barack Obama. Like, oh my God, when's inauguration?
The 20th.
Is it 20th January or something like that? Oh my God, somebody tell me when inauguration is. I got to plan my drinking festival. But yeah, no, you're right. I find it so, you know, we are defined by wealth in this country. And I don't think anybody should be able to kind of talk you out of that, whether it's Oprah, you know, whether it's Michelle Obama. Like, nobody be like, oh, we're not looking at the wrong way. Wealth and race doesn't matter. That's not what you were saying, Michelle, when you were pounding Obama as a way to kind of show him as being a homeboy. You weren't saying that race doesn't matter and wealth doesn't matter. Like, you know, if you're poor in America, people treat you like trash. And we're disproportionately poor. And most of the time, of no fault to our own. This is the legacy of slavery. Like, nobody wants to deal with that. And people want to keep blaming us for it. One thing I'm not going to do, I'm not going to be blamed for something that just is not my fault. It's just not going to happen.
Keep going.
Yep.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Hello?
How you doing?
I'm good. You know something too that I'm noticing. It's like as being a Black African American man, classified as black. It's like you got to keep evolving in this economy. You know, it's scary. You know, looking down at the future. And when I talk to other Black people. Now, you know, I was basically getting blasted for the last 8 years if I criticized Obama. I had to go through my social media timeline and look at all these pictures of Barack Obama, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King in one picture. And I'm like, listen, if them two gentlemen was still alive and I mean, with the process of mental evolution, they would have been screaming outside of the White House throwing stones. So, you know, and this whole thing that, you know, Black people we've got into, and I'm not blaming Black people. I totally understand, you know, how we got here, but we don't want the truth. We just want to feel good. You know, you can't criticize somebody because they're coming with a positive message. Just like when I called a couple weeks ago, and the gentleman I was talking about STEM. His name was John Brian Hope. And I was going through my timeline, and I kind of got tired of hearing his videos. Because my thing is this. When you're speaking to Black people and you're Black, we need the truth. You understand what I'm saying? You just can't come with a narrative of we need to do better, but you don't want to talk about institutional racism. Or you can't be, you know, talk about racism, but you can't talk about, you know, our spending habits. You got to be right there on the cuff. Black people need the truth. We don't need this. We don't need the feel good. I don't want to hear these feel good gurus who just trying to sell me a book or have me come to their lecture. You know, so, and another thing, and I understand because I really couldn't put things into its proper context, but now I get it. You know, my great-grandparents, they were sharecroppers in North Carolina. You know, they migrated from North Carolina, came to Newark, New Jersey, you know, came up from the projects and, you know, bought a home in East Orange, New Jersey. And they lived a fairly decent life. But, you know, I mean, but this is my legacy. This is where I came from. I'm second or third generation. I'm second generation project. You understand what I'm saying? So putting that into its proper context, you know, I'm starting to see the bigger picture. But it's how did you bring everybody else into the fold to see the same picture? Not saying that I'm right or I'm wrong, but just to basically challenge and pump our brakes a little bit and look what's really going on and where we headed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I agree with you, Carl. I think you said a lot of interesting stuff in there in terms of where we're headed. And Irony said that, you know, you talked about you talked about Obama and seeing the pictures of Obama with X and King. And Irony was like, he's Ralph Bunche. He's Ralph Bunche. He's a symbol during a time when, you know, a symbol was necessary. For a lot of reasons. We can talk about why this symbol was necessary for a lot of reasons. But he's Ralph Bunche. That's who he is. That's Barack Obama right now.
Right.
So you know.
Right, Yvette. I got one more question, and I'm gonna hang up. Do you think? Because I mean, I complained about the problem, but solution. Do you think Black people as a group, we just need to scrap all media, like social media, the news, and just really start getting amongst ourselves and start interacting, and creating more social groups. I mean, whether your group is formed in church, wherever you want to be, because it seems like media is really not. It's not having a good effect on us. It's making us more delusional. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the problem. But see, the problem. If you want to talk about, I definitely think it's time to ditch, mainstream media. But in terms of media in general, I think media is good for some reason. I think it's definitely time for us to kind of ditch Instagram. Like I tell people most of the time, my Instagram, I share information on Instagram, and I look at like healthy food. That's about it. You know, and Denzel Washington said something that was like, ignore media and you're uninformed. Listen to media and you're misinformed. So what I would say in terms of, follow me on media. I don't want you to stop looking at me, but I think there's a lot of good stuff you can do with me. Like you can find the actual blogs and people that you want and not follow anything else on media. Like we live in a space like you only have to follow media that you trust. You ain't got to follow nobody else. And we also live in a place where you can go on YouTube and you can find any writer. You can find any thinker. You can find any thought leader on there talking about a subject that you want. So I think instead of using media to follow celebrities, I think we need to start using media to understand where we are situated economically and try to find solutions of how to do stuff about that. Like you can set your Facebook up to see certain things first, like to see certain people first. You can set your Facebook up to only see certain pages that you follow. You can go to YouTube and only look up certain people. So I think in terms of your question, we have to start being much more deliberate in how we consume media. We just consume media like you're a fat person on the and I'm not fat shaming, so hush. Like you on the sofa and you just eat potato chips. Like it's not that you're just a greedy person. It's just that like you're like mindlessly eating because that's. You just didn't put the potato chips back up, and so now you just snack them because it's hard not to snack them because they're good. So that's kind of where we are. We're just mindlessly consuming media. I just think we have to be more deliberate about how we do it. But I want to thank you for your call.
No problem.
I appreciate you.
All right, keep going.
Yeah, one more.
One more.
Don't drop anybody without.
I didn't drop.
Oh, okay.
Oops.
Yeah, you did.
Oops.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, Yvette. Hi, Army.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hey.
Oh, I'm splendid. This is really,
Who is this?
it just takes your breath away, when you really think about the wealth gap, when you really think about the inheritance that we lost and that we will never, even if we get reparations, that we will never get, the proper amount of money that's owed to us due to, the white, they got land that didn't even belong to them. Mm-hmm. How you got to give something away that you don't even own? It's incomprehensible when you think about, like you said, you started your program, you said, think about what he just said. When you try to wrap your mind around what really, really happened to Black people and why the only thing that slavery has caused is death, hell, and the grave for Black people in this country. And we have leaders that are just, I sent you a email today that was talking about, the leaders that we have played a starring role in doing absolutely nothing but aiding and abetting this propaganda that we have going on with Black people, leading us astray. And I'm just so over it. And it's what the young guy was talking about is that we need our own code. I think that we do, because that's the one thing that Black people don't have that other groups have. They have their own language and they have their own code. And let me tell you what the white man's code is. It's called the Constitution. And the Constitution is the white man's affirmative action plan. Now, when they talk about they don't like government, they love the government when it comes to the Constitution and everything that the government is going to give to them.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah.
And I just, you're right, and Barack, they sold us a bill of goods. It was not true. These are people that I lived door to before they even had children. You have no idea how I can't even stomach. I stopped watching television. I can't even stomach to see these people on television. I told you, I knew these people before they had anything. Mm-hmm. And to see this transformation and to see them, this whole celebrity thing, and not take, Black people dying in the street, every day. These kinds of consequences that's coming out of, being Black, not taking it serious. These leaders, I can't think of all of them need to be put out. We need to vote them out. We need to stop. We need to really, really stop and think about what we do. This is my suggestion. Whatever it is we've been doing for the last 30 years, let's just stop. Let's just stop doing whatever we've been doing for the last 30 years. That's the only thing I can think of right now.
Yeah, it ain't working. Let's have a moratorium on like whatever we've been doing. Like no, I want to thank you for that. I appreciate you calling in again. And I want to say something. I want to say something that goes to like what you said. You said something that was very important in the sense of, and I've brought this up before, in the sense of the land that white people got for free. But you have to think of it in the context of they got land for free and our land got stolen. Like, what does that look like? One of the things, that Ta-Nehisi Coates did do was the reparations article. And he details, white people just basically going around stealing. That's your horse, I want it. That's your land, I'm going to take it. And you know how? I'm just going to run you off of it. And the police aren't going to enforce anything that you say. They're going to say you need a piece of paper that you don't have or didn't even exist before you came. So we're going to steal your stuff. And then the stuff that we steal from you, we're going to pass it down to our kids. And then when we pass it down to our kids, we're going to ask you why you aren't doing better. And we're going to tell you that why you aren't doing better is because of your culture. And I don't think we're going to do that. We're going to find Black people who agree with us. And who are going to tell you as well that the problem is your culture. The problem isn't that we stole from you. The problem is that you just don't know how to be an American. And so, this is your personal problem. That's the diabolical nature of what is happening to Black people. And you wonder why so many of us are doing pyramid schemes. Like, we've been driven crazy by this madness. That's what's happening to us. But I think the first thing we need to do is stop buying into this thing that is our fault. This happened because of something that we did do or didn't do. That makes us sort of apolitical to say, well, if I could just fix my house. No, fixing your house is part of, we talked about families and talk about, when Antonio was on, we talked about family and about being deliberate. That's fine. Do that. We have to do that. We have to be deliberate in terms of how we structure our lives. But don't look at this as like you caused this. You didn't cause this. You have to be deliberate because it's messy and you're in a quagmire. So you have to be strategic because of where you are. You can't just be out there all willy-nilly when people are shooting at you. It don't make no sense. But it don't mean that you gave them bullets because you didn't. Okay? So I think that's what we need to understand. I want to apologize to the callers who didn't get through tonight. The time went by kind of fast. Antonio and I probably went over a little bit, but I hope you all got something out of it, and I want you to think about it as we exit this call. Again, thank everybody. Thank y'all for coming out and spending 2 hours with me where we talk about this stuff and hash it all out, and we're gonna get somewhere. So I appreciate it. Till every Monday and Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have this. So I'll see you all again on Monday. If you want to see more shows, I'll put the Patreon donation link in the YouTube, or go to breakingbrown.com and you can donate as well so that we can kick this up a notch. So thank you, everybody.